Hi everybody, it's almost the end of the week. Guess what day it is? It's baking day. As most of you know, I used to be a pastry chef and a chef instructor, and so that's why I've been kind of doing these videos. I'm not the best expert by any means, but anyway, today we're going to do a classic afternoon tea cake that's on every afternoon tea platter. It's called Victoria's Sandwich, and it's said to be Queen Victoria's favourite cake, hence the name. Anna, the Duchess of Bedford, in the early 1800s was Queen Victoria's lady-in-waiting, and she was the one who's been credited with starting the tradition of afternoon tea, because they would have breakfast and they'd eat lunch early and then they'd have dinner pretty late, and she'd get a little faint in the afternoon, a little sugar drop, so hence that started the hot cup of tea along with small sandwiches, small little bites, just to keep her going until dinner time. So that's kind of the history of afternoon tea and how it came about, and it's still one of my favorite meals of the day. Don't often have one. Usually when I go back to Scotland, that's the first thing I want to do, is go to some of my favorite tea rooms, and on my travels I try and have afternoon tea if it's somewhere. My favorite ever was in Cape Town at what they call the Mount Nelson Hotel. It's the most gorgeous, elaborate afternoon tea. So if you ever go to Cape Town, South Africa, check it out. I want to take my family there one day. So today we're going to make Victoria's sandwich. I'm going to lower the thing. It's basically a sponge cake with fresh jam and fresh cream in the middle. Nice and simple, and it's pretty easy. First of all, I'm going to show you I'm going to dip this a little bit. We have our two baking pans, and we're going to line them. And the way you line them is parchment paper. Do not use wax paper. Don't use tin foil. Don't use saran wrap. Parchment paper. And you're going to grease the pan. I use the paper from our butter. It just has just enough leftover butter on it. So you're going to rub it all over so that we have something for the parchment paper to stick to. So make sure you get the sides. You see that in here? And it's really good if you're going to make cakes to invest in good, solid cake pans. This is an 8-inch pan. It's Sulatab's own brand, great brand. Thick metal to get even baking time after time after time. Easy washing. So if you see cheap ones, so I've cut myself off here. If you see some cheap cake pans versus more expensive ones, you think, why do I want to pay double the price? Well, like anything, you get what you pay for. And these will last you pretty much a lifetime. And you'll always have great cakes. So the way to do it is get your parchment paper, which is a little bit bigger than this. Tip it upside down. Sorry. And then you're going to draw a circle of your size of your cake pan, and then cut an extra inch around where you've drawn the line, and then you're just going to snip like 1-inch intervals from the edge to where your line is, just roughly. It doesn't have to be exact. I did most of this before, and then making sure the side with your pen marks is down. You don't want that contaminating your cake. And you put that in your pan and just really get into those edges. Push it against the edge, and that's it. That's going to stop your cake sticking. And can you see that? So all those little slits you make, just make it fit nicely and they overlap each other to get a nice perfect round. Then for our ingredients, it's best for when you're making cakes to have ingredients at room temperature. So I took my eggs out overnight. I took my butter out overnight. So we have 8 ounces of butter, 8 ounces of sugar, 8 ounces of self-raising flour, and 4 eggs. So it's nice and easy to remember. 4, 8, 8, 8. This is self-raising flour. I'm going to put myself back up here. God, I wish I had a cameraman. Self-raising flour. If you can't get self-raising flour, use regular all-purpose flour. And for every cup of all-purpose flour, put 1/2 teaspoon of, 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder. Now, a lot of people get confused with baking powder and baking soda. This is baking powder. Baking soda is just bicarbonate of soda, baking soda by itself. Baking powder is the soda along with cream of tartar. So it does different things chemically. So make sure you have baking powder. And then I'm going to move over to my best friend, my mixer, in the corner. I just dropped my phone. I'm going to try and edit that bit out. The tripod fell over. Hey, we're just doing the best we can with all this. I'm going to move over to my mixer that you can see in the background. Okay, so in here I have my butter, 8 ounces of butter, 8 ounces of sugar with the paddle, not the whisk. Some people get confused. If you have a KitchenAid or something similar, best not used to use this one for this particular action, so use the paddle. Or you can do this with a hand mixer, whatever you have. You can do this by hand too, but it'll very tedious. I'm gonna make a noise. We're going to mix that for like a minute, and then using a spatula just push down the sides here, and we're going to beat it for another minute more. So it's still kind of yellowy. We want it to be really pale. This is just dissolving the sugar into the butter and making it nice and light and fluffy. And that's the secret for a nice light sponge, is giving this a good beating. Now you can see that's very pale, hint of yellow kind of color. So now it's ready. And we're just going to add our eggs, not all at once. We'll just try add one at a time and then beat between each addition. Just on a slowish turn. And once each egg is more or less incorporated, whoops, 2 just dropped in there, that's okay. We'll just go real slow. If we dumped all our eggs in at once, it would shock the batter and you lose some of that fluffiness. So you just want the fat to slowly incorporate with the sugar. Now I'm adding half a teaspoon of vanilla. Little word about vanilla. Again, it's kind of what you get, what you pay for. Sometimes you'll see vanilla extract, imitation vanilla, and it's so much cheaper than real vanilla, and you're like, what's the difference? It just gives me vanilla flavor. Well, you get so much better flavor with good vanilla. Like this little one here was about $18, but it's quite concentrated. My favorite is vanilla paste. That's just quite difficult to get. You can get it at Solotab and perhaps Williams-Sonoma and some other places, but I was at Central Market yesterday and got this pure vanilla extract. It smells divine. So half a teaspoon into that, and then we're going to slowly put the flour in. Before I start the mixer, I'm just going to talk because it's noisy. We're going to add the flour, just about 1 heaped spoonful at a time on a slow speed. Here we go. So the minute the flour is more or less incorporated, I like to stop the mixer and finish it by hand. Check out my really pretty spatula with butterflies. And then we're just going to fold it. And folding means getting your spatula in, not mixing too much. We don't want to develop the gluten. The minute you put flour into anything when you're baking, you want to slow down and not be developing it too much. Unless you're making bread. Bread's different, but for cakes and muffins and bread, not breads, other things, and just make sure it's slowly kind of cutting and lifting. That's what folding means. And see, the batter is quite stiff. It's not a runny batter. And then we're going to divide it into our 2 pans. I'm going to make sure it's equal. And if you really want to be thorough, you can weigh each cake pan, so make sure each slice or each half is going to be the same size. And let's scrape out all that goodness. I'm getting hungry already. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. If you really want to check, we can check. So 12. This one has a little bit more. And of course, I did wash my hands before this. Perfect. And I have also taken a offset spatula, if you can see that, with a little kink in it. These are really handy. It's a small one, I also have a big one, and it really helps getting into pans so we can even out the batter. You don't want to push all the air out, so just very gently smooth it until it's pretty much flat. And then these are going to go into our preheated oven, 350 degrees, for about 20 minutes. I'll have my cake racks ready, and then we'll let them cool and we'll put the filling in. So I just peeked through my oven glass at my cakes. The big secret with cakes is do not open that oven door before they're ready. Otherwise they could be rising, they're not quite ready. You change the temperature, let air in, and they sink and they flop. So if you ever have a flop cake, it's usually that you've peeked in too soon. So I did set that timer for 15 minutes. More likely it's going to be closer to 20. So after 15, if they look fairly golden brown on top, you can peek, but don't be tempted to peek until they're ready. Then we're going to test them with a little cocktail stick, which is a toothpick, or you could do a thin knife. You just want to make sure the middle is nice and cooked. So we'll check it out. Okay, here is our finished cake. I'm using a little skewer. It's come out nice and clean. If you had any sticky cake batter on that, you'd put it back in. So we're going to turn it out. This is the tricky bit. Be gentle, flip it over, and over. Oops. I have this great cake rack here. You see it has 3, so if you're doing a 3-tier, you can get them all on one at once. And then we're just going to very gently peel off our parchment paper. Don't rip it off in one, or it can pull off some of the edges. Just going to ease it off. Some places it sticks a little bit. And there we have it. These look and smell so delicious. So I'm going to let them cool down. We're going to put the scones in the oven and we'll have tea. While we're waiting for those scones to cook, I just want to give you another couple of tips. When you decide you want to start baking, get all your ingredients together, weigh everything out, put it in little containers and little bowls on plates, whatever you have. There's nothing worse than starting to cook and mix ingredients, and then you get to something vital in a recipe and you're like, I don't have it. Baking is science, so you have to make sure all the chemistry is working at the right time. Kind of like relationships, right? So be organized, get all your ingredients together, have everything at the same temperature. Usually it's room temperature. Think about it overnight. Get your ingredients out overnight. And something's bleeping at me. Oh, it's okay. What else? And as you're baking, one of the best things to do is keep organized, keep cleaning as you go along. Don't have clutter everywhere. Throw it all in the sink or wash dishes as you go along. It's so much easier to keep things neat and tidy, and you don't make mistakes or cross-contaminate things. When I used to work in catering, it was wonderful. I had Mario, my sweet little dishwasher. I could make as much mess and use as many pots and pans and bowls and he would come running over and scoop it all away like the fairy and bring it back all nice and clean in 10 minutes. Whereas at home, you realize when you're baking, you go through a lot of dishes, utensils, bowls, it gets messy, but still wash as you go along and keep organized. And keep cleaning your surfaces, wash your hands. I'm sporting I couldn't find my apron. I like to cook with an apron when I'm baking so I don't have flour everywhere. But this was my old teaching chef jacket. I probably shouldn't mention the company, just in case. But it was one of the best kitchen stores that does cooking classes, and I used to be a chef instructor. Anyway, that's why I kind of like this, although it's much more fun when you have an audience and you can chat and you can get one-on-one feedback. So this is just me talking to my camera and trying to remember to keep looking at the lens. I've done some video lessons, and the last couple of days this week there's been some great seminars and there's so much to learn. So hopefully you're enjoying these. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Watch me on Instagram, realTeawithV, sort of a play on realty words, but realTeav. Check out my Facebook and leave comments if you have questions. Love to hear your feedback. And yeah, I encourage you to use this time, go out and bake. There are a lot of simple things, and it's fun and it's delicious, and there's something very nurturing about baking and cooking for your family. In this crazy time, we've got to have some distractions, so baking and cooking is a wonderful distraction. Guess what time it is? It's almost tea time. Our cakes have cooled down. I left them literally for a couple of hours. Scones and things like that you can eat warmer. A cake really needs to cool down. If we then put some filling in it, whether it was buttercream or regular cream, and there was any heat left there, it would just kind of melt. And also the gluten fibers and the texture, it just needs time to settle, cool, kind of coagulate. So if I tip down to my platter here, sorry, I have this beautiful cake stand. You could put it on any plate, but it's nice to put it on here. And then I'm going to start off with my jam that I made yesterday. As you can see, it's beautiful jam, not too solid, not too runny. I think just about 3 generous spoonfuls. And then we're just going to smooth that over. I think we do need a little bit more. Oops. I want to be fairly generous with the jam, but you don't want it all running down the sides. You just want to take it more or less to the edge, but not completely to the edge, because when you put the next layer on, it's going to come out a little bit more on this side. We have some lovely chunks of fresh strawberry still in our jam, as long as the layer is even. So I've probably used about ½ a pound of jam in here. I'm going to do that. And then when I get fresh whipped cream, so heavy cream, and I've just added a little bit of powdered sugar and a little vanilla extract. And we're just going to put some small blobs all over here. Clean off your spatula or whatever you're using. And you're just going to very gently spread this out. You don't want to mix the cream and the jam. You just want another even layer. Oops. See, if you go too much, you want to keep that nice fluffy whipped cream. And again, not right to the edge, but close. Wherever you've got jam, just cover up. Then we're ready for our next layer. I can do this around the camera. So I have my second layer. This is the tricky part. So I just line it up and just bloop. And if you're slightly off, then just even it out. You can see some of that is squishing to the side. It's okay if there's a big amount. That would take it away, but that adds to the charm. And lastly, we're just going to dust it with powdered sugar. Here we have powdered sugar. Look, the way I like to do it, I have my little sieve here, and I just like to tap it against my hand from a height all the way around. Because you don't want clumps, you don't want a big chunk of it, you just want a light dusting. Just go over it a couple of times, it doesn't matter if it goes on the edge. And there you have your beautiful cake. Let's cut a piece, shall we? Oops. I probably need a better knife than this. Yeah. How delicious does that look? Serve that in your guests. Good enough for Queen Victoria, it's good enough for us. So, Victoria sponge.